Welcome to today's bedtime story, The Lighthouse Keeper's Secret. On the edge of a quiet seaside town, where the salty breeze carried the scent of distant rain, there stood an old lighthouse. Its warm, golden light swept across the dark waters every night, steady, reliable, constant. The town below moved through its days without much thought of the tower or the man who kept its light burning. But night after night, the lighthouse watched over them, casting its soft glow across the restless sea. Inside the tower, Samuel tended the light. He had been the lighthouse keeper for many years, so long that the routine had become like breathing. Each evening, just as the sky faded from amber to deep blue, he would climb the winding stairs to light the lamp. He cleaned the glass, adjusted the gears, and made sure the beam stretched far into the night. No one ever asked how he spent his evenings. They only knew that the light always returned, constant as the tide. But what no one knew was that the lighthouse held a secret. Behind the main room, where books lined the walls and brass instruments gleamed faintly in the low light, there was a small wooden door. Its paint was cracked, its hinges worn with age. Most would have walked by without ever noticing it. But every night, after the light was lit and the tower had settled into its steady rhythm, Samuel unlocked the door and slipped quietly inside. The room beyond was small, just big enough for a desk, a chair, and rows of narrow shelves that stretched up to the ceiling. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of salt and paper. The shelves were lined with glass jars, some clear, some frosted, each one sealed with a simple cork. This was the lighthouse's secret. The jars held the worries of the town below, soft, unspoken burdens that drifted through the night like whispers on the wind. As the lighthouse stretched its beam across the sea, it gathered what people left unsaid, the quiet fears tucked beneath brave smiles, the heavy thoughts carried alone in the dark. Samuel never asked how the worries found their way to him. They simply arrived, gently, invisibly, waiting to be held. Each night he would sit at his desk, listening to the distant waves and the slow turning of the lamp overhead. One by one, he wrote down the worries on small slips of paper. Will I ever find my way? I miss the person I used to be. I wonder if anyone truly sees me. Some worries were small, a passing doubt, a fleeting ache. Others carried more weight, grief that lingered, fears that never quite faded. Samuel never judged what appeared. He simply wrote, folding each paper carefully before placing it inside a jar. I'll hold this for now, he would whisper as he sealed the lid. No one ever knew where their worries went. They only knew that some nights felt lighter, that sleep came a little easier, that burdens they couldn't quite name seemed softer by morning. Samuel had been keeping the secret for so long that he couldn't remember when it had first begun. Perhaps the lighthouse had always gathered the town's worries, and he was simply the one meant to tend them. Or perhaps the habit had grown slowly, one quiet act of kindness at a time, until it became something larger than himself. There were nights when the room felt heavier than others, when the jars lined the shelves in shimmering rows, each one holding a weight too delicate to be seen. Those were the nights Samuel stayed a little longer, placing his hand gently on the lids as if offering comfort. You're not alone, he would whisper into the quiet. It's safe to rest now. The jars never stayed full for long. By the time dawn stretched its pale light across the sea, the worries would begin to fade, dissolving slowly, carried away by the turning of the tide. By morning, the little room would be empty again, ready to gather new burdens with the next night's light. The town would wake, unaware of the small, invisible kindness that had passed through the dark while they slept. One cool autumn night, as the wind rattled the windows and the moon hung low over the water, Samuel climbed the stairs once more. The tower creaked softly around him, familiar and steady. He lit the lamp, watched its beams sweep out across the waves, then slipped through the wooden door. The jars shimmered in the low light, their glass catching faint glimmers from the turning lamp above. Samuel sat at his desk and began to write. Another long day, another heart carrying more than it was meant to. Not everything needs to be carried alone. He folded the paper and placed it inside a jar, sealing the lid with care. Outside, the waves rolled on. The town lay sleeping, unaware of the secret room tucked high above them, unaware of the quiet man who carried their unspoken burdens night after night. Samuel leaned back in his chair, eyes closing for a moment. The jars shimmered softly around him, each one holding something no one else would ever see. His work was quiet, like the sea, like the stars, like the turning of the tide. By morning, the jars would be empty, the room would be waiting, and the light would continue its steady rhythm, sweeping out across the dark waters, carrying the town's worries with it into the night. As you rest now, imagine your own worries carried by the lighthouse's gentle glow, taken without question, held without judgment. Breathe in, feel the weight within you. Breathe out, and let it go. You don't have to carry everything tonight. The world will hold it for you until morning. You are safe, you are loved. Now let sleep take you. Good night.